Welcome back, everyone, to episode 6 of the Ancestral Cure podcast. Today, I've got a very special guest. She is a functional movement coach, fascia coach, and she specializes in helping clients improve their posture, breathwork, and fascia. Please welcome Ashlie. How are you?
Hello. Yes, I'm well, thank you. Thanks for the intro. That was amazing.
Of course, yeah. I've been looking at your content for quite some time now, and I think fascia's I think it is a bit less niche than a lot of the other like health topics, whether it's circadian or functional blood work. And I think the great thing about fascia is that most people already go to the gym in some sort of capacity. So I guess we'll be sort of speaking their language and trying to teach them how to actually, optimize and improve the way that they train at the gym. So I think it's great that we're having this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is exactly it. Whenever we go to the gym, whenever we move, we are using our fascia. It's just whether we're doing it functionally. So yeah, it'd be a really interesting topic to dive into.
100%. So I'd love to start by I'd love for you to tell our listeners a bit about your background, your story, whether you've got, any health, like a history in health. So, yeah, what led you onto this journey of studying fascia and biomechanics, if you will?
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been in kind of the fitness industry, whether like for myself or professionally. So I trained as a traditional personal trainer and kind of just entered the traditional fitness world. But I saw a lot of things that was wrong with it, and actually a lot of it came from my own experience as well. I'd been kind of doing traditional training for over 10 years, weight training. I even got into like calisthenics and flexibility training, and that's kind of all I did. I really didn't venture into any other style of training. And it led me to a place of dysfunction. So I started to develop lots of pain, tightness, and injuries in my body. And, I wasn't old. I was in my kind of mid to late 20s, and I couldn't just accept that, oh, like most people say, oh, it's just, you're getting older. It's these things happen. Whereas I couldn't accept that. And after a bout of injuries, I decided that, like most of us do, when the mainstream kind of doesn't give you the answers after going, getting physio or going to chiropractors or getting massages, they just didn't kind of get to the root cause of the issues. They were just kind of quick fixes. So that's kind of what led me down to looking into fascia and actually biomechanics and how our body should actually function and how what I was doing was dysfunctional and even what I was kind of telling my clients to do in my job, it wasn't helping them either. So then that really led me down this whole world of fascia and things really started to open up and change for me from there.
That's incredible. Just to clarify, when you talked about how you thought that chiropractors and physiotherapists weren't really addressing the root cause, I thought that was interesting because I think chiropractors especially, they are seen as holistic, and I guess the mainstream would view them as pseudoscience or quackery. But it's interesting that you said even like you thought that even chiropractors weren't addressing the root cause. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Like for me especially, I mean, I'm not gonna say that they didn't help. Of course, they had some kind of help in my kind of journey, but what I was after was to really get through to that root cause of why these issues kept coming back. And for me, chiropractic, what they were doing for me is kind of just adjusting my bones. They weren't actually addressing the fascia that influences the bones, if that makes sense. So yes, definitely, I'm not saying that there isn't a place for these things, but I think like long-term solutions, there is definitely more to dive into.
Exactly. I do wonder if a lot of these alternative treatments sort of if they're guilty of also just looking at a symptom rather than addressing the root cause. I mean, have you looked into like acupuncture, for example?
Yeah, I mean, acupuncture, I do actually love acupuncture, especially when we look at the more kind of traditional Chinese aspect of what acupuncture does and how it influences the meridian lines and the electrical signaling in the body. Yes, I think that's more of a kind of holistic, again, like root cause solution rather than thinking of it as like a kind of quick fix, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah. And I think it's interesting when people talk about like meridians. I'm sure we can dive into this as we go on, but I think it's a good time to now talk about what fascia is because I don't think it's like a commonly known nomenclature.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's relatively new, when we look at kind of fascial science, it's only within the last kind of 30 to 40 years that we've actually started to research it. When we dissected the bodies, cadavers, we would cut away this tissue because it would be like dead tissue, and then we'd just go straight to the muscles and kind of and look at that in anatomy. So it's really within the last sort of 30 to 40 years that we've actually started to dive deeper into this soft tissue that actually is incredibly important for so many aspects in the body. And yeah, absolutely, we can start with like what is fascia as a simple question. As I've alluded to, there are so many benefits and aspects to fascia. I specifically look at fascia in the way that it relates to how it shapes our body and how it provides structural integrity to our body. So when we look at the traditional model of anatomy, we kind of think of our body in parts. So we look at, we've got a bicep muscle and then we've got a pectoral muscle. But actually, the brain doesn't think about our body in that way. It thinks of the body as one whole connective system. And that is what fascia is, right? We're not 300 muscles or however many muscles we are. We are one fascial bag. Everything is connected. If you cut your skin in your arm, you'd see fascia at that superficial level right underneath the skin. If you kept going and going down to the organs would be wrapped in fascia. The spine, fascia is everywhere. So it really is connecting the full body, and it's providing an incredible amount of structure to the body. If we didn't have fascia, we'd literally be a puddle of mush on the floor. It is really responsible for holding our bones in position. And this kind of goes back to what we were saying about the chiropractic practice is that it influences the positions of the bone. So, as you can imagine, it's incredibly important.
I can imagine, yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned how in mainstream anatomy it's sort of all of the different parts are just viewed as like separate components. I mean, I remember like in GCSE biology you just learn about this the skeletal system and the muscular system, but there isn't that like we're not taught about what links them together now. So it is fascia. It's the like you said, the matrix of connective tissue which holds our bones and muscles together and influences their structural integrity.
Mhm. Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And it's often said that our bones float in a sea of connective tissue. They literally float in fascia. So yes, the health of our fascia influences the health of our bones and the position of our body and how we hold ourselves in space.
Right. So when we talk about addressing it holistically, like bones and muscles, what we really should be doing is looking at the fascia and then the muscles and the skeletal system will come downstream of that instead of
Yeah.
hyperfixating on bones in isolation or muscles in isolation.
Yes, exactly that. We should think of our body as one whole connective system, and we cannot isolate any part, basically. And if we try to, then that's when we run into issues, as any aspect in health, right? We when we try to isolate things, that's when we run into trouble.
Exactly. We can't just treat things as like oh this is an independent variable, this is a control variable. It's like everything's an independent variable. And so when we talk about functional movement, is that just like ways of exercise or mobility which allow us to optimize our fascia, whether it's, stretching or I'd love for you to talk a bit more about like what does functional movement encompass?
Yes, so the theory behind this is how fascia is, because it is all interconnected. It is our body's strain distribution system. So what that means is that it distributes force across the body. So no one area is taking all of the strain, right? So if you're going to lift something, you're not just lifting with your arms, you're using the ground reaction force from the ground into your feet. You're using your glutes, you're using your deep core, you're using your diaphragm, you're using your breath, you're using everything, right? And this is what force distribution is when we look at fascia. It has this incredible characteristic to allow us to do that throughout the body. And when we look at the fascial lines, fascia is organized into different lines throughout the body. So we have a line that runs all the way up the front of the body. We have lines that cross spirally, and this allows us to distribute that force in different directions. So, yes, going back to your question, when I like to think of functional movement, this is what I'm always thinking about. I'm always trying to think about how can I utilize my body in all different planes of motion to distribute force throughout the entire body rather than just kind of, going to the gym, doing your bicep curl, and then all the strain is kind of getting trapped here. And then thinking about how does this movement actually relate to how you would lift something in real life? You would never just pick something up and do this. You'd use your whole body because our bodies are so intelligent, they know to distribute the force throughout the entire fascial chain.
Yeah, I mean I've not thought of it like that before, but it makes complete sense. And I'm definitely guilty of what you said, like isolated muscle movements. But it is 100% true. I mean, like you said, it's how we distribute pressure throughout our body, and it's never just going to be in one muscle or one part of one part of your arm or your legs. It's going to be everything. And when you said that, for example, when you're lifting, it's like the force of the ground is it's acting on you. So it's not just biology at that point, it's physics, I suppose.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Like you will be able to feel it when next time you go and do a heavy lift, whether it's in the gym or whether it's in real life. Like really think about, pressing your feet into the floor and using that force from the ground to help you get that lift. Yeah.
Right, yeah. And I mean, like you said, a lot of the things that we do at the gym, they aren't movements that we realistically need in real life. They're just isolated movements treating our body as if they're machines, sort of.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be, there are things that when we think about how we move as humans, we evolve to walk upright and we develop these pelvises that allowed us to walk on two legs and balance on one leg because when we walk, we are on our one leg for 80% of the time. So we need that stability in our hips, right? So when we're thinking about functional movement, we're thinking about how to optimize our kind of natural biomechanical blueprint. And a big aspect of that is walking and running because that is what we evolved to do as humans. But then, of course, we can also bring in these other aspects. We developed arms, right? So for lifting and pulling and pushing. So we can start to think of like what are our kind of natural movement patterns and then kind of translate that into gym movements because at the end of the day, like, we're not kind of living in the woods anymore and doing all these functional things. We do need that kind of stimulus from the gym. It's just thinking about how we can adapt our movements to make them more functional.
100%. I mean, yeah, it's not as if the gym's like inherently, it's not as if it's inherently detrimental to the way that we move in our fascia. I suppose there is a way to do it correctly versus the way that I think mainstream bodybuilding looks at it. It's like we said, treating muscles in isolation. So why do you think it is that mainstream bodybuilding and fitness, if you will, aren't they aren't talking about fascia? I don't think they're aware that it's like the missing piece of the puzzle.
I think because historically the fitness industry has been so focused on aesthetics, right? Bodybuilding, I mean, there's a whole industry around this on building your muscles as big as possible, right? And building those six packs, abs, and things like that. So I think this is why we are massively missing the functional aspect of it. And when we look at bodybuilding specifically, it's, where anyone can build muscle, right? Like, I think this is where people get really confused that when we see people with big muscles and six packs and they're super toned, we think, okay, well, they are the picture of health and they are the finite of health, but actually that doesn't translate to how well, going back to this idea of force of transmission, just because you have defined muscles, it doesn't mean that your body is efficient at transmitting force. And then that's where we start to run into issues with injuries and things like that because the body doesn't know where to distribute the strain well.
Yeah, it seems like everyone I know these days has some sort of injury or some sort of, you know, thing holding them back from doing a certain workout, whether it's they hurt their shoulder or their knees. I think knees are huge when it comes to, functional injuries. So it's just really interesting how a lot of people who hyperfixate on building muscles and aesthetics, they aren't really considering the functional aspect of it. And it's also interesting how when you look at bodybuilders, they don't tend to live very long, and it's a bit sad. But it does make sense if you're hyperfixated on building mitochondria in your muscles, then that's going to be taken away from, mitochondria in areas that need it more, such as the heart, the brain, I guess the liver.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And this the other big aspect of fascia is that the more we have this kind of smooth flow of fluids and this communication it through, we know that fascia is piezoelectric as well, so it's constantly communicating those electrical signals. But if we're not building that and we're just so focused on muscle building, like you said, then we're missing this whole aspect of what keeps us healthy and contributes to longevity. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Could you elaborate on what you said about muscles being piezoelectric? I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, so fascia is
Right,
piezoelectric.
right.
So
Yeah,
yeah, so obviously like we've said that the whole system is connected, right? And what's a huge benefit of that is that it can um communicate quickly, right? So when we move and when we get that kind of like compression in the fascia, it creates a small electrical charge. And this is what transmits throughout the whole fascial line. So our cells can communicate with each other. It helps with metabolic health, with our energy, with cellular repair. Um, and that's ultimately what health is, right? Like signaling to our brain to tell us what we need. What hormones do we need? What are the health of our cells like? What are the health of our tissue doing, to then improve the health of everything, of every function in our body. So yeah, there's so many things to fascia, not just movement, but the overall health and functioning of our bodies. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, 100%. And I think not just bodybuilding and fitness, but I think the whole medical health, the way that we think about health and the whole paradigm, we should really be talking about health from like a bioelectric point of view. I mean, I'm sure you've heard people talk about structured water.
Mhm.
So, and how the negative charges create energy in our body, and how our cells actually have these membrane potentials which are negative because of the structured water. And it's when this negative charge collapses, that's when we get, cellular dysfunction. That's when we start to get, cancer physiology. So I think if medical experts, and I think if the way that the mainstream teaches people about health as something bioelectric and like grounding, for example, or it's not, I guess it's not just electric, but like magnetism, the way that magnetic flux affects our bodies. Is this something that you take into account when you talk and research about fascia?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we cannot separate these things. We cannot separate the talk between grounding and electrons and electric charge in the body without talking about movement and the health of our fascia. That structured water is within fascia. So the health of our fascia and how well structured it is influencing our overall health, like we said, and that really is influenced by our environment, the light we're exposing ourselves to, the grounding that we're doing, the foods that we're eating, even our emotional state, but and yeah, also movement as well. So we cannot separate any of those things. They are all within the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. So on the topic of training specifically, are there any, exercises in particular that you think like this is really, really detrimental for our fascia, or are there any exercises which you'd recommend?
Mm. Yeah, so in terms of, I mean, look, nothing is completely detrimental. I'm not gonna and sit here and say, don't do this, don't do that. It's the issue is when we chronically do them, we do them too much and we don't do anything else. So a bicep curl in itself isn't going to be dangerous to us, okay? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it's when we only do that and we do that chronically. So we're going to the gym and we're doing that every week and we're not doing anything else. That's when we start to run into issues. Yeah. So just think, look at what you're doing over the long term. So those kind of like isolated movements, like your bicep curls and your hip thrusts, and even things like deadlifts, like how well do they actually distribute force throughout the body? Um, and then movements that we want to focus more on is things, like I said, that distribute force throughout the body. So thinking about movements that use the whole of the body. So movements that encourage you to twist. Like we know that the body works in spirals. We have specific fascial lines that run across body. And so this makes us really great for developing those rotational mechanics. So anything that takes you into a spinal rotation. Um, and what else did I want to say? There was something else. Yeah, and mobility as well. Like mobility is an important aspect of how we move, right? It makes us resilient. So rather than thinking about taking our body into kind of long hold stretches, so like, where we perhaps take that into our bodies into a hamstring stretch and then hold it for 30 seconds. How does that actually benefit our biomechanics? How often do we do that in real life where we take our body into a very long hold stretch without using the muscles? So instead of thinking about stretching and mobility in that way, think about how to elongate the fascia and the muscles in a way that serves our biomechanics. So, for example, if you were going to pick something heavy off the floor, you would stretch your hamstrings, yes, but then you would use your hamstrings and the connection from the floor up through the legs and into the glutes to then push that weight back up. Yeah. So it's thinking about taking those muscles into their length and then using the muscles to shorten them to bring yourself back up. Sorry, a very long-winded way of describing that. But yeah, just basically thinking about mobility in a way that serves our biomechanics.
No, absolutely. And I think when you're at the gym, it's like you said, it's really important to be using your entire body, twisting, rotational mechanics. And so when you talk about stretching, obviously you're not saying that stretching's bad or we shouldn't stretch. You're just saying that we should stretch in a way that would be consistent in how we act in real life, whether it's, yeah, like lifting a box, pulling something. So it's about looking at what you're doing at the gym and seeing, will this actually be implemented in my real life, or is it just like a mechanical movement that I'm doing just for the sake of like one particular muscle group?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Because the more we take those the areas of the body into kind of long hold stretches that don't serve our mechanics, the more, yes, it is detrimental to our fascia because we're causing laxity in the tissue. So yes, absolutely. Thinking about things that absolutely serve our everyday movements and our natural movement patterns. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, what do you mean by laxity? It's a new term for me.
Yeah, so fascia, so we know that fascia, a huge element of it is elastin. So we have elastin in our fascia, and that's what makes it, it gives it this spring-like quality. So if you think, for example, think of the Achilles when you take it into a stretch. So say think of like a calf stretch position where you kind of like stretch the Achilles. And then it springs back. And that's what happens in running and walking. So you get this stretch and then it springs back. And everywhere. So some areas in the body will be more elastic than others. But basically, when you stretch it too much, kind of over time, that fascia loses its spring elastic ability and it becomes lax and it doesn't spring back. Yeah. And
Right.
then that's when we run into troubles of, we can't fully create force. We can't get enough force through the joint because we've got tissue that literally doesn't spring back. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Mm.
So what are your thoughts on, I know you mentioned, should we talk about how cardio sort of plays into this, whether it's running, sprinting, jogging? I know a lot of people in the health space advocate for not doing excessive or strenuous cardio because, or like, I guess running because of the stress hormone. So what are your thoughts on this? Like, do you think this plays a big factor into our fascia?
Yeah, I mean, the body is incredibly adaptable, right? So, yes, some people can run more than others, and it's not particularly detrimental to their body because they have built up that tolerance. So, yeah, absolutely, like running isn't a bad thing. Um, I think it's when we try and do it too quickly. So when we're trying to get that cardio aspect, but we're going from kind of zero to everything, then we haven't like properly prepared our tissues for that amount of high tolerance kind of cardio. So we definitely need to build it up slowly. But then we've also got this other aspect of, are we doing too much? So are we kind of getting in that cannibalic state where our body's kind of starting to eat itself and it can't actually repair its tissues quick enough. So we kind of have to weigh up like what is the perfect balance of kind of cardio fitness and long state fitness for where our body is at and our tissues are at.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense because when it comes to we talk about the sun and sunlight and how it's not the sun that causes skin cancer, it's the fact that we haven't adapted our bodies to handle it. So I think when it comes to cardio, it's the same thing. It's not that running or jogging inherently, raises stress hormones to a detrimental level. It's just that when you've done it enough and you've adapted yourself to it, you're not going to get like it's going to be more of a hormetic stressor as opposed to like a chronic stressor.
Yeah, and we can even look at so females' cycles as well. This is a big aspect of it. I think a lot of women are kind of trapped in that cycle of, we've just got to get it done. We've got to get in the work. This is what I need to kind of burn the calories or whatever. But actually, how much is that, really affecting, a female cycle and actually placing more stress on them? So yeah, definitely a few aspects to look into for that.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up calories as well. I know we're sort of going in tangents here, but because
It's fine. But
when we talk about, weight loss and metabolism, obviously the mainstream fitness view is that, it's just calories in, calories out, and they're not like that statement itself isn't inherently incorrect. It's just that when they say it, they're only thinking of how many calories you're eating, how many hours are you spending on the treadmill. They're not thinking about our metabolism or how external output inputs such as sunlight and circadian rhythm or sleep could actually affect, our mitochondrial electron transport chain and how we actually metabolize, protons and electrons into energy. They're just thinking of like, right, how many calories am I eating? It doesn't matter like what the nutrients are, and then how much am I burning on the treadmill or on the Stairmaster, for example. But do you think fascia's one of those things where it affects our metabolism and weight loss?
yes, absolutely. Like our metabolic health is completely tied within our fascia. And like we said about cellular communication, if we've just got areas of the body that are just kind of dead and
Yeah.
sleepy, or we can't actually use them because our biomechanics doesn't allow for that range of motion, then that area is just going to be getting it's not going to be communicating with the brain well. It's not going to be eliminating toxins well. It's going to be building up all of that kind of chronic inflammation in that area. And yeah, it's really interesting what you say about how the fitness industry is so focused on literally move more and eat less, calories in, calories out. I have been in that conventional fitness world where that doesn't work and people get frustrated because they are working so hard in the gym. They're doing their 1 hour cardio a week, they're doing the lifting, they're doing the crazy hit workouts, but it's just not translating to them losing weight because they haven't addressed their fascia, they haven't addressed their light environment, they haven't addressed their chronic stress. So I can absolutely advocate for that from a first-hand experience working in the traditional fitness industry that yeah, it's not always the case. Yes, sometimes it works, but
You said that when we talk about like calories in, calories out and how people can't lose weight, it might just be fascia and there might just be a connection that they're not addressing.
yes, exactly. Yeah, like I said, I have experienced this in my own professional, being in the conventional fitness industry where clients just cannot lose weight. Like I said, they're training so much, they're doing their hit workouts, they're even adjusting their diet, but they're not factoring in all of these other things like their fascial health, their light environment, their stress. So yes, it definitely goes way beyond just calories in, calories out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you say that with fascia, I guess it's sort of like when you've got when you've got fascia working correctly, then cells are better able to communicate with each other, and mitochondria run more efficiently. And I suppose that's how, as humans, we improve our energy levels and we burn more calories if your goal is weight loss, which I know isn't the end all be all, but for a lot of people, it will result in better health outcomes. I suppose that's also why you see a lot of elderly people who I know in Asia it's a huge thing where, or East Asia where like the elderly people will, wake up in the morning, they'll do a lot of these like Tai Chi movements. They're using their whole body, they're twisting, they're rotating. And when you look at them and you talk to them, they've got like really high energy levels. They might be in their, 80s, mid 70s, but they're vibrant, they've got lots of energy. So I definitely think the fact that they're, using their whole body is definitely playing a fact contributing a lot to that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because their body, the mitochondria know what to do with that energy, right?
Yeah.
Because their fascia can communicate, and their brain knows, what signals to send, and vice versa back. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I do wonder, what are your thoughts on CrossFit? Because I know it's like a hot topic in the fitness industry, but from what I've seen, it obviously is a lot of Olympic powerlifting, but I think they do focus a lot on mobility as well.
Hmm. Yeah, to be honest, CrossFit is something I've never done, so I couldn't speak to exactly what they do. But yes, I know that they kind of incorporate a range of different movements. So yes, tick, tick, tick for that. It's just whether it is beneficial to kind of their biomechanics and, our natural biomechanical blueprint, whether they're kind of optimizing their sprint mechanics. And we can also look at it as well, if our body is in a place of dysfunction, then how beneficial is doing such like high power lifting and things like that. Great if our body's good and our fascia's good, then absolutely. But there is always that aspect of, how is it actually benefiting our body, depending on, where we are at.
Exactly. I suppose if, like you said, if you're dysfunctional, it might not be the best idea. But
Mm.
if you're someone who's able to, stretch and rotate and move without issue, then it's good to combine that mobility from the CrossFit, but also the powerlifting that you would do.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's funny. I used to be a swimmer actually. Yeah, I was a swimmer for like a competitive swimmer for like maybe at least 3 years. And I think swimming's great because you're getting that full range of motion and you're not isolating muscles. You're not, just doing a bicep curl. I suppose you could say the same about most sports, but with swimming specifically, it's like you're focused on twisting the whole body and optimizing these different movements. Though I have heard that with swimming, the way that affects your breath work, I think with mouth breathing and stuff, because when you turn your head, you're trying to get oxygen in. So I do wonder if that could negatively affect, fascia if it's causing you to mouth breathe, or is it like a case of the pros outweigh the cons?
Interesting. So when you come up for air, you're breathing through your mouth?
Like, yeah, yeah, because you're
Yeah.
desperate for it. So the more you can get, the better.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, how did you feel after your sessions? Because we know if we breathe through our mouth that it can, and like you said, you're like gasping for air. Is it kind of putting your body in that stress state? How did you feel after your sessions? This is kind of like what I always ask myself, and my clients, like, how is what you're doing affecting how you feel? Like if you're going to the gym and you're doing these really stressful workouts and you're constantly breathing through your mouth and you're breathing through that upper chest, how is that then making you feel, and then how does that impact your body's ability to like repair itself? So yeah, quite an interesting one, that.
Yeah, I mean, mentally, I felt great because it's like an accomplishment,
Yeah.
and physically, it's like I think after you swim, especially if you're sprinting in a competition, you're obviously exhausted, but I do think the mental benefits, and I suppose the way that you're moving your body and your mobility, you feel a lot more mobile after a swim, like after a swim session.
Yeah, so you kind of like, yeah, you felt those benefits rather than, yeah, the kind
Yeah,
of,
I suppose the pros would outweigh the cons in that aspect. And also when you said that, because obviously when you do swim, it is a very stressful. Because if you're sprinting, you want to be as quick as possible, and and I was definitely a sprinter as opposed to a like long distance swimmer. But once once you're actually sprinting and you've got like your stress hormones are running high, like I don't like I think that's a good thing because in that moment you're meant to be stressed so that you can actually win and move as quick as possible.
yes, exactly. Yeah, like we want to get our heart rate up. It's just thinking about how well we can then recover from that, right? Because exercise is a stressor, but then it needs to follow with a kind of recovery situation. If we're then just going to go back to, keeping in that heightened sense of stress and we're perhaps breathing through our mouth, then yeah, it's going to keep us in that high stress state.
Yeah, and I think, like we said, it's a hormetic stressor. You're stressed in the moment, but then in the long term, it like your body will adapt and become resilient and create mechanisms which benefit you long term. And I guess, yeah, that's the same with weightlifting. When you weightlift, if I'm correct, there's a tiny muscle damage, like your muscle fibers get damaged a bit, but then in response, your body like rebuilds it in a way that's stronger and more resilient. So I guess it's just a case of if it's like a good hormetic stressor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. The body always goes through that repair state, and same with fascia as well. Fascia goes through that kind of state of repair as well. So yeah.
Yeah. So I heard you briefly talk about the lymphatic system and how it's essentially how our body eliminates toxins, whether it's sweat, sauna. So how important do you think like lymphatic drainage is in optimizing our fascia?
Yes, like so helpful. So helpful. The again, we can't talk about the lymphatic system without talking about fascia because our lymph capillaries sit within the fascial matrix. So the health of our immune system and our lymphatic system is determined by the health of our fascia. So if we look at it on the cellular level, when we look at what happens in the cells within our fascia, is that the blood delivers nutrients, it delivers oxygen, and it delivers those messenger molecules that communicate with the brain. And that cell then produces waste, and that waste then goes through the lymph capillaries, and like you said, we expel it in whichever way, so sweating, urine, whatever. Um, so it relies on this kind of smooth flow of fluids coming in and out, and that's how we remove those toxins. So what happens if we start to have sticky fascia, adhesioned fascia, fascia that has become dense? Perhaps we've got poor posture in that area, so it's built up all of that fascia. Perhaps we've got an injury where it's built up all of that scar tissue and it's become very dense. Is that flow of fluid starts to become inhibited, and then those toxins cannot go, basically. They cannot be removed. So it starts to build up all of that kind of waste and toxins in that area. And then it starts to build up inflammation, and perhaps we might get pain or swelling there. So, yeah, absolutely. Like these systems are so intertwined, and we definitely need to address the health of our fascia to address our fascia, our lymphatic drainage.
Right. So if we've got all of these toxins building up that we're not eliminating, then this will restrict our fascia and restrict the way that our body can move in a way that's beneficial to our fascia and our muscles in general.
Yeah, exactly. And the lymphatic system doesn't have a pump, right? So it relies on healthy fascia and healthy movement. So not just the movement that we do when we move around, but the gliding of the fascial tissue. So fascia is organized into layers, and they're meant to glide like this, and that's what keeps everything nice and hydrated and smooth. But when they start to become densified and dehydrated, the layers start to stick together. And then that's where we start to see the waste start building up and the fluids can't flow. So yeah, that's when we start to get that toxin build up.
Yeah, because I'm a huge sauna advocate. Like, I love the sauna. I think it's the way that you feel after it, like not just physically but mentally. You feel like you've eliminated a lot of toxins because you have. So, is the sauna something that you like highly recommend and you incorporate into all of your workouts?
Yes, absolutely. I love sauna, especially at this time of the year when it's a bit colder and the tissues are a bit more stiffer. Yes, it's definitely better to. It's a great thing to do. And actually, you compare your fascia release with a sauna
Mhm.
because your tissues are warmer. They're more fluid. There's more fluids pumping through them. They're more pliable. So it's a great time to take a tool into the sauna and do your fascia release in there and encourage more of this movement in the fascia to eliminate the waste, basically.
Right, so some sort of like massage toy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Or I've got my tool that I take my tool into
that's cool.
into the sauna, so you could put it under your calves, into your back, anywhere basically, anywhere that you just want a little bit of release. Yeah.
That's great. And I mean, I've seen like obviously sauna's got a lot of other benefits beyond eliminating toxins, like the way that it improves your cardiometabolic health and the way that like I think the way that it optimizes your hormones because you're putting yourself in that hormetic stress state. I think it's really, really beneficial.
Yeah, exactly. It's another one of those things that kind of challenges our body, right? You know that when you start to get really hot in the sauna, your heart rate starts to increase, and that is a hormetic stress like you're talking about, and it builds resilience in the body. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Though I have heard a lot of people talk about how I think cardio has actually been proven to be more effective than the sauna in eliminating toxins. But I think it's probably a case of like you can do both. You don't have to like pick one or the other. You can incorporate cardio for the movement and the improve the fascia, and then sauna for the like if you just want a piece of like if you just want some peace and quiet and just sit and eliminate toxins, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a different vibe, isn't it? Like you're
Yeah,
sweating, but in a sauna, you kind of just get to sit and relax. Whereas cardio, like you're saying, you're trying to move your full body and increase the heart rate via that.
exactly. Um, what are your thoughts on, do you think cold exposure could tie into this as well? Because I think that's something else that's been, a lot of people advocate for it. A lot of people are against it. So how do you think this sort of ties into fascia?
Yeah, into fascia. Yeah, I mean, there's this whole like contrast therapy as well. So, like when you go into a sauna, you spend 10 to 20 minutes in there, and then you immediately go into the cold. How is that influencing fascia? How is that building like resilience in our bodies, and how is that changing um, the kind of um, what's the word, like characteristics of the fascia? So you're getting this nice pliability, and then you're going straight into that cold environment and kind of like a forcing your body to adapt in that way. So yeah, there's again, it's coming back into this like hormetic stress. But then I love looking at cold plunges and things and cold exposure more in relation to like our circadian health and like seasonal health as well. So now we're looking at winter and how to adapt our body to those seasonal changes is that we get into that kind of cold state, and that helps with our overall metabolic state and our mitochondria, and things like that. So yeah, lots of benefits to cold plunging, definitely.
Yeah, I just think it has to be, well, I suppose it has to be done, sensibly and, not excessively. Do it in a way that your body's able to, build up that tolerance slowly instead of just going straight at it recklessly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I heard you mention like how when we hydrate our fascia, it's like that's the keyword hydrate. So are you talking about like how much water we're drinking, or because I know a lot of people talk about how hydration's really the story of how our cells make water, whether it's, structured water. So is it just a case of like drink as much water and fluids as possible, or is it more nuanced than that?
Yeah, way more nuanced. There is definitely an element of hydration and water, but what's actually in our water is our water hydrating us. So thinking about minerals, but also, so the hydration of our fascia is, what keeps the layers moving and gliding nicely, and that relies on movement. We need to move in a way that hydrates our fascia. It's almost like a sponge. So when the muscle contracts, it kind of like pushes out on the fascial fiber, because every muscle is surrounded in fascia, and when that muscle contracts it pushes out on the fascia, and it's kind of like a sponge. So you're kind of like wringing the sponge, you're constantly like bringing in new hydration. And then the same can be said for any kind of fascia release technique. So when we use a ball or a tool like I've just showed, we're going in and we're compressing the fascia. And again, it acts like that sponge. So we go in, we compress the fascia with the tool, the fluids come out, and then as we take that tool away, the fluids come back in. So again, it's like that sponge, and that's how we keep that nice hydration in the fascia.
Yeah, I think I've noticed that ever since I've started, optimizing my circadian rhythm or managing stress levels or even incorporating more mobility, like I drink a lot less water and it's not because, I'm thirsty and I'm like depriving myself of it. It's just I don't feel the need to drink, liters upon liters of water every single day. And I think it can actually be a sign that you're chronically dehydrated if you feel the need to constantly be chugging water.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. I've noticed exactly the same as well. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think I try to tell people that like chugging water isn't going to hydrate you. You're just flushing out minerals and electrolytes and nutrients which are required to enter cells and actually hydrate them. But it does make sense because most water, especially if it's just still water, like you're not going to be getting those electrolytes, those minerals. I suppose it would be a lot better if it were, spring water. Um, or even do you think sparkling water would make a difference? Because I know you've got like the CO2 aspect of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure on sparkling water. It's not something that I drink particularly. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it would be if it were more hydrating, it would be great. Yeah.
Do you prefer sparkling?
Yeah, definitely. Um, but I mean, obviously there's a lot of other drinks like milk is a lot more hydrating, bone broth,
Yeah,
juice,
bone broth. Yeah, you've got all your collagen in there. You've got, yeah, raw milk, all of the nutrients in there. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, fruit juice as well. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
yeah. But with bone broth, because you brought up collagen, so obviously people talk about how we need to eat, gelatinous cuts of meat to get those amino acids in. So with collagen, do you think, because obviously it's like it is a protein, but it's what keeps us elastic, our skin elastic. So I'm assuming that's like very, very tied into fascia because if collagen is how we keep our skin elastic and fascia is, how we keep our muscles and bones and our entire movement system elastic, I'm assuming that like if you collagen would be huge in optimizing fascia.
Yeah, definitely. When we look at the makeup of fascia, it is collagen. Collagen makes up fascia, and this is what keeps fascia strong, because collagen in fascia has this kind of like cross-linking effect like this, and that's what keeps the tissue nice and strong, and it provides it with a lot of tensile strength. So yes, absolutely, like the collagen that we consume absolutely translates into our fascial health. Yeah.
Yeah, I think because people just, and this goes back to the whole problem with the mainstream gym industry. It's just like eat lean cuts of chicken breast, eat like lean cuts of steak. They're not getting that, collagenous and gelatinous tissue you'd get from, say, oxtail, shank, even, I guess, what's that other one? Like cow tongue, I think. Like there's a lot of collagen and gelatin that you'd be getting from these meats that we just tend to throw away because, they're fattening or they're not like 5% chicken breast.
Yeah, exactly. And our ancestors would have thrived on these, right? They wouldn't have wasted any of the animal. So we really do need to think about eating nose to tail, and organs as well, not just the collagen and the muscle meat, but the organs as well. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So I think a huge part of fascia that needs to be spoken about is how it links to stress, our emotions. negative thoughts, whether we've got some sort of trauma, because I'm assuming it just like it restricts fascial movement and it keeps you in that state of like fight or flight where you're just super tense and you can't actually move properly. So is that a lot of what you do with clients, like addressing stress, trauma, helping them manage their negative emotions?
Yeah, again, these are two things we can't separate. We know that fascia holds that emotion in some way or another. So we know that when we do experience stress or some kind of emotional trauma, that the body responds. So we may subconsciously contract, we may hike our shoulders, we may contract our pelvic floor, or our breathing may become more shallow. And actually, a good anecdote that I thought I'd share for this one is that. So a couple of months ago, I was driving in my car on the motorway and I went to change into the left lane. However, just as I was doing so, I noticed that there was a car coming up, so I had to like quickly
Yeah.
swerve back into my own lane. Um, but as I was doing so, I felt this kind of sensation, like a wave, go all the way down my body, and it kind of pulled in my pelvic floor area. Um, it soon went away. So as soon as I was like back in my lane and I perceived my environment as safe, like that sensation went away. It was just a very quick sensation. Now I know that this is called a startle response. So when the brain receives, when we perceive threat, our body reacts quickly, right? Because our brain is slow to respond, but our body needs to react quickly to protect us from whatever threat is there. And so we do this to kind of protect our vital organs, right? For our survival, it's a survival mechanism. However, when this becomes kind of chronically ingrained in our posture, in our body, perhaps we have chronic stress from work or family situations or whatever, is that body adapts that kind of chronic tensing mechanism. And then this is where we start to experience kind of pain and tension and tightness in the body. So yeah, that is absolutely, that's kind of the mechanism behind how stress and trauma stores in the body. But these are all things that, it's these are never in the body forever. They can definitely come out, whether it's through, the things that we're talking about, myofascial release or kind of acupuncture and things like that. It's often why people, when they do these therapies, is that they often experience a huge emotional release. It's because that area is starting to ungrip and they're starting to feel kind of lighter in their body. So yeah, it's a really interesting link between emotional stress and our fascia.
Yeah, I think it's actually like I think people should be happy to know that like a lot of their health issues they might not be completely resolved, but it can move the needle a lot if we just address our stress levels and change the way that we think about things and react and respond to our environment and our health. I mean, both of my grandfathers are 95 years old, and one of them is really like he's really vibrant. He's like happy. He's got like a huge community, like a huge family community. My other grandfather, he's still relatively healthy, but he's also, he stresses a lot about his health issues, and he's always like worrying about what's going to happen to him. And I think you can sort of see that like manifest in the way that like his posture's decent, but like I think when you're constantly worrying and stressing, it's obviously going to have like a negative effect on health, even if it didn't, like even if you're completely healthy, and then you start stressing over not being healthy, and then that's when it you sort of like create your own reality in that way.
Absolutely. Our body becomes our thoughts, and you can see it in people. You can see how the kind of chest starts to collapse in. We may get the shoulders start to come forward, the head comes down, we may feel in this stress or kind of vulnerable state. And another big part of it is our breathing, right? So when we are stressed, we tend to breathe through that upper chest and we stop using the diaphragm and the rib cage. So again, that then starts to collapse and we get all that fascia restriction around here, and then that influences our posture. We start to kind of collapse on ourselves. So yeah, absolutely, the body becomes what the mind thinks in a way.
Yeah, and it's also why when you look at, elderly people with great posture, they're always super vibrant and super enthusiastic rather than like they're actually functional and they're enjoying themselves. And I think that obviously plays a huge factor into their posture and the way that they outwardly look.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So when it comes to like stress and trauma and how you work with clients, do you think it's a matter of like addressing the fascia first and then the stress and the trauma will solve itself, or is it solve the stress and trauma first and then the fascia will resolve itself, or is it different for each person?
I think these things go hand in hand. They're things we need to do alongside each other. Yeah,
Mm,
absolutely. As I said, when we do start to take a tool to the body and we start to look at those areas that have been holding on for so long, it really does create that, it really lifts your kind of state of mind in a way. And we can kind of look at it in how we look at biomechanics and the kind of work I do with that as well. When we address the fascia, we're starting to then retrain the body to hold itself differently through corrective exercise. It's again the same with our emotional state. We've kind of lifted the body of those stresses. Now we kind of need to retrain the mind to, adapt different patterns of thinking. Um, and going back to the breath as well, the breath goes hand in hand with this. The more we can tap into that diaphragmatic breathing and the more we can breathe slower and deeper, the more it signals to the body that it's okay, we're safe, we can relax, we can calm, we can regulate. So all of these things, yeah, they need to work alongside each other.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's why a lot of breathwork coaches are becoming a lot more popular these days. People who incorporate different types of breathing, different types of, emotional regulation, like journaling, think of like how can you as a person like regulate your emotions and fix your nervous system in a way that will benefit other aspects of your health, including but not just fascia.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, all of these things go hand in hand.
Yeah. So when we talk about like myofascial release as well, we talked about using massage tools. Are there any other things you'd recommend? Like, what are your thoughts on, when you go to like a massage parlor and you just get a massage? Is that like not addressing the root cause, or is it like what are your thoughts on all of these different?
Yeah, so when we do fascia release, let's just first look at the kind of mechanism behind this. When we do fascia release, what we're doing is addressing adhesions in the fascia. So, like I said, when the fascia becomes dehydrated, it starts to stick to each other, and we can't get that smooth glide. What happens then is that these layers start to stick together, and we get those kind of like adhesions in the fascia. Kind of, it's what people often refer to as like a muscle knot.
Right.
It's not actually muscle, it's those kind of adhesions in the fascia. That's what we're addressing. um, so when we take a tool to those areas, and what we want to do is hold it on there for a long amount of time. So this could be, I mean, different tissues respond to different inputs, but it could be up to 5 minutes on an area just to try and really melt that adhesion. So that's what we're doing with fascia release. When we do things like massages, unless someone's willing to kind of press on that area for a very long time, you're not actually going to address those adhesions in the fascia, and you're not going to kind of encourage the body to ungrip that area, if you like. So yes, it can be good for like stimulating flow in the body, a massage, but I'd say it's not actually addressing those adhesions in the fascia.
Right, that's interesting. I always thought massages were like, well, obviously, I guess they still are really good tools you can use if you've got tight muscles. But like you said, if you've got like the knots and whether it's caused by stress or something, like it might help a bit, but ultimately, it's not going to be as effective as, looking at the whole body, holistically.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. And sort of as a last question, you mentioned at the very start, we were talking about acupuncture and you brought up like the meridian points. And how acupuncture is it like that? It activates the meridian points and I suppose the chakras as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you look at the meridians. They are almost identical to the fascial lines. So you know how I said we have different fascial lines in our body, and if you look at a map of these fascial lines, so for example, we've got one at the front, we've got one at the side, the spiral line. A lot of these meridians kind of overlap with those fascial lines, and this kind of goes back to what I'm saying about how fascia is this communication highway. It's piezoelectric. It transfers information, and is that what the traditional Chinese medicine, was that what they were trying to do way back when it was invented? They kind of already knew about these systems in the body, and that's how they were able to track the different kind of meridian points in the fascia, if you like. So yeah, it's not an area that I'm super like an expert in or anything, but it does really make you think when you look at how similarly they are related. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating how a lot of these health topics that we talk about, they sort of, it's like the traditional Chinese medicine, they discovered it thousands of years ago,
Do
and
it.
it's we're
Yeah,
just rediscovering ancient wisdom. It's not actually anything new to us.
yeah, it's literally like it's been hidden for us for so
Yeah.
long, and
It's like a time capsule. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. But yeah, Ashley, this was such a great conversation. Like I learned a lot from this podcast, and I think with fascia, it is a lot more it's more easily implemented than whether it's, circadian health. Like when you tell someone wake up at 5 a.m., watch the sunrise, or turn all the lights off, it's obviously helpful, but it's going to take a lot of time for them to actually adapt to that. Whereas with fascia and it's just like having your legs up against the wall at night to let that lymphatic drainage, using the sauna. Most people already go to the gym, so you might as well, like, if you're already there, then it's not that much more effort to just, modify your workout to make it, or stretch before you work out to make it more, like, make it more beneficial for your fascia. So I think it's the reason it's not as niche as like circadian health is because it's a people can implement it more.
Yeah, exactly. If we're all everyone moves, right?
Yeah.
Like moving, we are moving our fascia. It's just, yeah, trying to implement those things that will be more beneficial to us. And if we're already going to the gym and doing that anyway, then yeah, these are absolutely things we can implement. The only thing I would say is that if we do come from a place of dysfunction, perhaps we're experiencing pain, injuries, and things like that, there is a little bit of a process to kind of addressing the fascia first and finding what fascia might be stuck, and then kind of like building corrective exercise from there. But yeah, still, like you're saying, these are things, fascia release, we can do it for half an hour to an hour in the evening, and then go into the gym and start working more on those kind of corrective exercises and functional movements. So yeah, it's easy to implement. It's just having a bit of a know-how on how to do it.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a lot more realistic than just move to the tropics, and quit your
Yeah,
job. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
yeah. So where can people find you, Ashley? Where can people, contact you if they want to work with you or just have any questions about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm at ashlie.movementwellness on Instagram. And I offer consultations. I do a program. So very much like what I was saying, I offer fascia release. Well, firstly, we'll look at your posture. So this is like a bespoke program. We look at the posture to see what's going on. I'll take you through a fascia release protocol. We'll look at corrective exercise, and then we'll look at things like mobility and optimizing movement. I've also got a course, a myofascial release course, if that's something people are interested in. And I built this
Mm.
tool because I found that a lot of the tools on the market just weren't getting to the releases that I was after, the deeper releases that I wanted. So I made this tool to help me. It was a very selfish invention, and then I thought actually this could help a lot of other people. So that's available to buy on my website as well. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been so great talking to you.